Somewhere in your memory, there is a night that changed everything. Maybe you were 6. Maybe you were 8. You heard something you should not have heard. A fight behind closed doors. A sob muffled into a pillow. The sound of glass breaking, followed by a silence that felt heavier than the noise itself. And in that moment, something shifted inside your small body. No one sat you down and explained what was happening. No one handed you a manual. But somehow, you understood. You understood that the adults in your life were not as strong as they pretended to be. You understood that someone needed to hold things together. And you understood, without a single word being spoken, that the someone was going to be you. That night, your childhood ended. Not with a funeral, not with a goodbye. It just quietly packed its bags and left while you were busy learning how to survive. And the strangest part? Everyone around you celebrated what came next. Your teachers called you mature for your age. Your relatives said you were an old soul. Your parents leaned on you like you were a friend instead of a child who still needed bedtime stories and permission to make mistakes. And you wore that label like a badge of honor. Mature, responsible, the one who has it together. But there was a cost that nobody saw because you hid it so well, a cost that you are probably still paying today. Let me show you what was actually happening inside your developing brain during those years, because this was not maturity, this was survival. When a child is placed in a position where they must regulate the emotions of adults, something called role reversal occurs. The child becomes the parent becomes the child. Psychologists have a clinical term for this. They call it parentification, and it is one of the most invisible forms of childhood trauma that exists. It leaves no bruises. It takes no photographs. It hides behind report cards filled with good grades and bedrooms that are always clean. But the damage is happening beneath the surface. When a developing brain is forced into hypervigilance, scanning every room for emotional landmines, calculating which version of a parent will walk through the door tonight, the stress response system gets locked in the on position. Your nervous system never learned how to rest. It learned that rest was dangerous. It learned that letting your guard down meant something bad would happen. And so you developed abilities that looked like gifts but were actually wounds. You can read a room in 3 seconds. You can sense tension before anyone speaks. You can feel the mood of a person before they even realize what they are feeling. People call this intuition, but you know the truth. This is not intuition. This is hypervigilance dressed in a nicer outfit. You did not develop this ability because you are gifted. You developed it because you had to. Your safety depended on it. And here is where the tragedy deepens. The child who learns to meet everyone else's needs eventually forgets that they have needs of their own. You learned that your job was to give comfort, stability, emotional labor. You learned that your feelings were inconvenient, that your tears made things harder for everyone else, that the best version of you was the version that took up the least space. So you folded yourself smaller and smaller. You became the therapist friend, the reliable one, the person who everyone turns to but who never turns to anyone. And somewhere deep inside, a child stopped growing. That child is still there, frozen at the age when everything changed, still waiting for someone to notice that they are not okay, still waiting for someone to say the words that were never spoken. You are just a kid. You should not have to carry this. Let me take care of you for once. But those words never came, and so the child learned to stop waiting. They learned to stop hoping. They learned to become so self-sufficient that they would never need anyone again. And you carried that child into your adult life without even realizing it. Let me describe what this looks like now that you are older. You struggle to receive. Compliments make you uncomfortable. Gifts make you anxious. When someone offers to help you, your first instinct is to refuse.
You have convinced yourself that this is independence, but it is not independence. It is terror. You are terrified of needing someone because the last time you needed someone, they were not there. Or worse, they made you feel like your needs were a burden. So you decided, unconsciously, that you would never be a burden to anyone ever again. You handle everything yourself. You ask for nothing. You perform strength so convincingly that people actually believe you are unbreakable. But late at night, when no one is watching, you feel the exhaustion that you hide from the world. You feel the loneliness of being surrounded by people who only know the version of you that you perform. You feel the grief of a childhood you never got to have. And sometimes, in your weakest moments, you have a fantasy. The fantasy is simple. Someone sees through you. Someone notices that you are drowning behind your smile. Someone wraps their arms around you and says you do not have to be strong right now. Someone finally takes care of you the way you have taken care of everyone else. That fantasy is not weakness. That fantasy is the voice of your inner child, still hoping, still waiting, after all these years. Now I need to tell you something that might be difficult to hear. No one is coming. Not because you are unworthy of rescue, but because the only person who can reach that child now is you. You are the adult that your inner child has been waiting for. You are the one who must go back and say what no one else said. You are the one who must hold that child and tell them the truth. It was not your job to fix them. It was not your fault that they were broken. You were just a child, and you deserved so much more than what you were given. This is where healing begins. Not with fixing yourself, not with more productivity or self-improvement or pushing through. Healing begins with grief, the grief of finally admitting what was taken from you.
The grief of looking at other people's childhoods and acknowledging that yours was different. The grief of realizing that your strength was built on a foundation of pain that you never asked for. Let yourself grieve. Not because grieving changes the past, but because the tears you were never allowed to cry are still trapped inside you, and they need somewhere to go. You were taught that crying was weakness. You were taught that falling apart meant failing, but the opposite is true. Falling apart is how you finally let go of the weight you were never supposed to carry. Here is what I need you to understand about your healing journey. You are not trying to become someone new. You were trying to reunite with someone old. The child who existed before the trauma. The child who was playful and messy and made mistakes without apologizing. The child who asked for things without feeling guilty. The child who believed they were worthy of love just for existing. That child did not die. They went into hiding, and your job now is to make it safe enough for them to come out. This means learning to rest without guilt. This means learning to receive without immediately trying to give back. This means learning to say no without a 5-paragraph explanation. This means learning to take up space unapologetically. This means learning that your worth was never about what you could do for others. It was always about who you are. And who you are has always been enough, even when no one reflected that truth back to you. Now, let me speak directly to the child inside you who is still listening. I know you are tired. I know you have been carrying grown-up weight in a body that was never built for it. I know you learned to shrink yourself to make room for other people's chaos. I know you taught yourself not to want things because wanting led to disappointment. I know you have been waiting a very long time for someone to see you. I see you now. And I need you to know something important. You did nothing wrong. You were not too sensitive. You were not too needy. You were not too much. You were a child, and you deserved protection, not responsibility. You deserved play, not performance. You deserved a childhood, not a survival mission. What happened to you was not fair, but what happens next is in your hands. You can keep performing strength until you collapse, Or you can finally lay down the armor and let yourself be soft. You can keep proving your worth through exhaustion, or you can finally accept that your worth was never something you needed to prove. You can keep abandoning your inner child the way the adults in your life abandoned them, or you can become the parent they always needed. The choice is yours now, and for the first time in your life, you actually have one. You did not get to choose your childhood, but you get to choose your healing. You get to choose rest. You get to choose softness. You get to choose to finally grow up the right way. Not through pressure, not through fear, but through gentleness and truth, and the radical act of treating yourself the way you deserved to be treated all along. You never had a childhood, but you still have a life. And from this moment forward, you get to live it as the person you were always meant to become. Not the performer, not the caretaker, not the small adult who never got to be young. Just you. Finally free. Finally seen. Finally home. I will see you in the next one.